As is evident from what we've heard, a major expression of contemporary far-right anti-Semitism is Holocaust denial in its varying forms and degrees, including Holocaust distortion, minimalization, and trivialization. Various forms of this disturbing phenomenon emanate from radical as well as more mainstream groups and movements belonging to this sphere. However, Holocaust denial in its different forms can be found in all spheres from which anti-Semitism emerges today. What is Holocaust denial? What forms does it take? When did these forms begin? How are they expressed? Why are they defined as manifestations of anti-Semitism? Let's hear more about these and other issues relating to this troublesome phenomenon.
Holocaust denial, as we researchers call it, has two main forms. One is what we call gross Holocaust denial, which means a denial that the Holocaust ever existed in the scope and in the numbers that historians and Jews and survivors are speaking about. And the denial goes not only against the numbers and the scope, but the means. They deny that means such as gas chambers, crematoria, even terrible medical experiments, etc., ever existed. So this is the gross one because it denies in the big lines. Well, such kind of Holocaust denial started already towards the end of World War II, even before it was ended, in France. And since then in France, which is I would say the intellectual center of Holocaust denial, since then there are, each generation, each few years, there is one more major Holocaust denial that around whom this gross denial concentrates. But the heydays of the gross denial were between more or less the middle of the 80s to the middle of the 90s. And then there was a core of about 20-30 major activists spread all over, many of them academics, but from other professions, not historians, in Canada, in Australia, in France, as we have said, England, United States, etc., Germany, 20-30 who knew each other. They still know, whoever is alive. They knew each other, they worked together, they had a journal, they had conferences, they had a lot of propaganda dispersed and distributed. But since the beginning of the 2000s, they suffered a number of blows. One of them was the Stockholm Conference, a major conference convened by the Prime Minister of Sweden, participated by some 50 countries, dignitaries, heads of state, that sort of launched the new millennia with a new approach to the Holocaust. Then there was the trial in England in which David Irving sued Professor Deborah Lipstadt and lost, and the trial ended with a very well worded and very clear verdict written by the judges, of course, who were later accused that they were Jews, but they weren't. And this trial definitely was another blow. Then you had Holocaust Memorial Day declared by the United Nations, and you had visits of the popes. At least 3 popes from the 2000s came to Yad Vashem, put flowers. Okay. Since then, the gross is less visible than it has been, and there is another form that you could call distortion or soft denial, demi, as they call it in France, half, not as blunt and gross as the former one, and it has many levels. They can move from diminishing the numbers, acknowledging that there was a Holocaust and killing, but not in such numbers, not in such scope. It can entail comparisons between the Holocaust and the suffering of other nations under the Nazi rule to a way that puts the Holocaust in the same line as other disasters, thereby denying the uniqueness of the Holocaust and the characteristics that made it a special outstanding event. Distortion can also be an encouragement of a local population to give respect and tribute to national leaders who at the time were supporters of the Nazis, right-wingers who assisted the Nazis in killing the local population, and now, after the fall of communism, they were rightists, they were against communism. Now, after the fall of communism, they are again the heroes. They are the national heroes, thereby saying that, okay, what they did was right, was nationally supported and justified, etc. So there are many forms to that, but I would say that both of them, and certainly the gross one, are a form of anti-Semitism. And there are two main arguments for that. One is that if it didn't exist, if it didn't happen, this means that the Jewish people has invented the story. If the Jewish people has invented such a horror story, this means that the Jewish people is a bit sick in mind and managed to fabricate a terrible story, not only to fabricate it, but to convince others all over the world that it was true and to hold Germany by the throat, which the Jews are still doing. This is outright incitement of a whole public. A second point is that Holocaust denial justifies, goes against anti-Semitism. What does it mean? Anti-Semitism was the basis of the Holocaust. For Germany and the countries that participated together with Germany, anti-Semitism there was a basic tenet. If you say there was no Holocaust, or in many other forms, you say that anti-Semitism, well, it exists, but not to such an extent. There is normal anti-Semitism, much as Jews deserve, but you, by denying, you sort of justifying something that goes in favor of anti-Semitism. Once the Holocaust is denied, it can be used, and it is being used, as an argument against the legitimation and the very existence of the State of Israel. Because what do deniers say? And I'll give as an example Ahmadinejad, the Iranian leader, who used this a lot, this argument. He said the following: if the State of Israel is based on the Holocaust and is a result of the Holocaust, then if there was no Holocaust, and there wasn't any Holocaust, this is what I'm told, then there is no basis and no legitimation for the State of Israel. Thereby, he and others who support this argument, in fact, ignore totally that the State of Israel was not, and I repeat, not born out or by the Holocaust. It almost didn't come about because of the Holocaust, because the public that was supposed to build it was being killed. Thereby, he ignores that Zionism is the element and the basis for the state. That since the 1860s, 70s, there were settlements being built, a whole entity, not yet a political entity, but a local entity, vibrant, vivid, creating, settling, culture, science, etc., that was already some 70 years old when the Holocaust began, when World War II began, is the basis of Zionism, of the state. Another form is to say, and this goes another way, another form is to say that in fact Zionism was an ally, an accomplice of Nazism, that they actually worked hand in hand And they use, as point in time, as a starting point in time, 1933, when there was indeed an agreement between the Jewish agency in then the land of Israel under the British mandate and the German, the Nazi government, yeah, in order to have Jews from Germany come here, and Germany would have in return economic advantages, purchase of machines and industries, etc. This indeed happened, but this was a way of the Jewish agency to rescue German Jews from Germany. But they see it, those who use this argument see it as a starting point for a cooperation that went all along the Holocaust. Why? Because Zionism was interested in having Jews flee Europe and come to the land of Israel. This, under the British mandate and the limitations of the British mandate, couldn't happen. But this doesn't interest those who hold this argument. And not only did they want Jews to flee Germany and then the Third Reich as a whole to the land of Israel, but later they were interested in the Nazis killing Jews that they did not perceive as suitable enough for the Jewish state and for the new Zionist Jew, which is a terrible accusation that has no basis at all.